Welcome to another video in this series, and today we are going to explore Azure Firewall Manager. Well, as the name says, that's what it is. It will help us to manage not only the firewall but a lot more than that. So in order to understand this, let me draw something which will help us understand Azure Firewall Manager in a better way. And it is not just to manage firewall, but we can also deploy resources like virtual network, hub, even routing, those kind of things as well. So right now I'm creating three different subscriptions running three different virtual networks, which has three different firewalls, just to understand with the very basic example or scenario. So we are running such organization where we have multiple subscriptions running multiple virtual network in different regions like R1, R2, and R3 with Azure Firewall 1, Azure Firewall 2, Azure Firewall 3. Now, if you see, we have to deploy Firewall 1 here, then we need to write all the rules and then manage. Same goes with the 2. Deploy, write all the rules from the scratch and manage. Same goes with the 3. Right? Then all the rules along with the firewall gone. Right? So that's the reason we have Firewall Manager in place. So what it does, Azure Firewall Manager. Well, Azure Firewall Manager provides us a centralized security management service. Okay, a centralized security management service that will help us to deploy, configure, and monitor multiple Azure firewall instances across different regions, subscriptions, and network topology. Okay. It will provide you a single control plane for managing all your firewalls and enforcing security policies at scale. Okay. So what it has security policies. So this is security policies, and it will apply these policy to all the firewalls. So right now these are just the empty firewalls and all the rules are here, and we can apply all these rules to these firewall, which means a single control plane from where we are managing all the rules, all the filtration, everything that a policy can have, and we are applying this policy to the different firewalls. Right now the question is, what if these require a different set of policies? Well, that will be sorted because we can have a parent and child policies, right? Which means we can have these representing your child policies and these representing your parent policy, or you can say global policy. For example, internet is blocked for social media websites. That could be a global policy which is applying to all the firewalls. Now, one of the firewall may say they need something needs to be accessed in there, because that application need regional, maybe some APIs, which is allowed here but not allowed to these, so only applied to this particular firewall. Okay. Now the another question will come, of course, because you got the idea what is policies, but what exactly are they? So policy are the rules that we define in the firewall. When we deploy a single firewall, we have different kind of rules like network rules, application rules, uh, net rules, threat intelligence settings. All those things we can apply in a policy. All right. And then we can deploy it on the firewall or associate it on the firewall. Associate is the correct word. All right. Earlier, what happens? We have a virtual network. All right. We have virtual network. We deploy subnet and we deploy firewall. And inside the firewall, we deploy rules there. Now, what we did, we just picked these rules out of the firewall. Okay. We just made it like a distributed system, we say something like that. We just disintegrate the rules out of the system and use it as a separate entity which can be applied to different firewalls. So this is what is happening, but this is not only limited to the policies. We can deploy the virtual network with the help of manager. Okay, so it does deployment as well. Okay, and help us to enhance the security by better management. Now, you need not to deploy a manager, it is there, and it can read all your virtual network which are running, whether they are secured by the firewall or not. All those things can be done automatically. So you're not deploying the manager, you're just utilizing it for your security management or network deployment or firewall deployment or policy deployment, right? We'll see that in the portal as well. So as of now, I hope this is this piece is clear. The basic concept of a firewall manager is clear, right? Why we're using it, right? Now, let's say you can create. Now let's understand the policy little deeper, okay? Because that's where the magic is happening. So we can create Azure Firewall Policy object in any region, okay, and link it globally to multiple Azure Firewall instances under the same Azure AD tenant, which means tenant is the main boundary here. We have tenant. All these things must be in a same tenant. What do you mean by these things? All the firewall, all the virtual network, firewall manager, all must be in the same tenant, right? We can create the policy in any region and make it a global. Okay. Now, if you're wondering if we are creating policy in a region and we are making it a global, then what about if the region goes down? Well, if the region where you create the policy goes down, now everything is happening from the big back end because it's a PaaS service, so it has a HA inbuilt, which means which means the paired region comes into the picture happening at the back end. You need not to worry, just for the information. If that region goes down and it has a paired region, the ARM or Azure Resource Manager object metadata automatically fails over to the secondary region, which means the policies are there. All those rules, regulations will be there globally to apply from the secondary region. So during the failover, or if the single region with no pair remains in a failed state, you can't modify the Azure Firewall policy object. However, the Azure Firewall instances linked to the firewall policy continue to operate, right? So no need to worry. It has inbuilt HA. If you're creating this any region, doesn't mean if region is down, the policy will not work. It will work. Okay. Already. Now let's see a few other things, like few more capabilities of Azure Firewall Manager. The very first thing as of now, what we understood is it will provide us centralized uh, firewall policy management, right? That is absolutely clear with the help of this diagram that we have created. Now, if we, because it is pretty clear, we are working on the policies outside the firewall. If whatever we are changing here, everything will change to those firewall rules to whom it is associated. Nothing to explain there, right? Now, this policy thing or this firewall manager, it's not like it will only work when you have multiple firewalls in a different virtual network. No, it supports multiple topology. Okay, it supports multiple topologies, network topologies, like hub and spoke, right? Centralized security where we have a hub, right? So we have firewall in the hub. We can have policies applied to that firewall in the hub. We might have multiple hubs in multiple regions. We have multiple firewalls in the multiple hubs in the multiple regions that can be taken care through the firewall manager. It also supports like virtual WAN virtual WAN security thing, right? And also the isolated one, that the example that we have took. Now, policies could be hierarchical, right? It was not there earlier, but it is there now. It is good. We need to understand a little more about it. Hierarchical policies, which means this policies apply to all three, so applicable there. This policies only apply to this, which means this is applicable and this applicable, right? Just like we have NSG on subnet and NIC. But there is a little criteria happens here, like who's when and who's not. We'll talk about it. All right, hierarchical policies. So what we need to do, we need to define a global security baseline policy while allowing the regional team to customize policies for their needs, like a child policy. CP is child policy. Okay. We let's take an example, like we can define a global parent policy like block malware sites or allow Microsoft sites, which is applicable to all the regions, and allow regional local teams to create child policies with additional rules, ensuring corporate wide security enforcement while permitting local flexibility. A few things here on our MS documentation. So this is Azure Firewall Manager, and this is policy overview. Yes, this is what we need. So here we can see Azure Firewall support basic, standard, premium policies, just like we have a basic, standard, and premium Azure Firewall SKUs. So this is actually the policies. Basic can give you these rules, standard can give you these rules, premium policy can give you all these rules. The same segregation that we see in the previous video. Now, hierarchical policies. Now, here you can see network rule collection inherited from a parent policy are always prioritized over network rule collection defined as a part of a new policy. So, parent policy wins. The same logic also applies to application rule collection. However, network rule collections are always processed before application rule collections, regardless of the inheritance. So, first network rule would be checked, and then the application rule would be checked, and that's how it works. Same goes with the threat intelligence mode. And net rules collection aren't inherited because they have specific to a given firewall, that we understand. Every virtual network must have their own right IP addresses, own resources for the netting. And it has a built-in rule, built-in high availability that we were talking about. It explains the same thing: automatic failovers to the secondary region, right? During the failover, if the single region with no pair remains a failed state, you can't modify the policy object. However, Azure Firewall instance linked to the firewall policy continue to operate. So I hope this point is also clear. Now let's take one more thing, because this is Azure Firewall Manager, these are Azure Firewall. What if we would like to have a third-party firewall managed through our network firewall manager? Well, that can be done. That can be done. Yes, that can be done, but it has some limitation. For example, it cannot be done if it is hub is your virtual network, but it can be done when you're using a hub, not virtual network, but virtual WAN hub. For example, let's take an example of third party is Zscaler Checkpoint, right? So the idea is to enhance the security by adding a third party or deep packet inspection. We could integrate third party firewalls and manage it through the firewall manager in when we have virtual WAN hub, only in that case, not with the simple virtual network case. So a company using Zscaler for internet security can route traffic through Zscaler's cloud while managing rules through firewall manager. So all the rules like policies are managed through firewall manager. However, traffic is managed by the Zscaler. Okay. Now this firewall manager also configure routing, which means once the policies are there, it can simply allow, ask, or apply the things that we do, UDRs, right? So it eliminates the need for manual UDR, user defined route setup, reducing errors. How? Because we can do it from the Azure firewall manager, from the single control pane. Like all the traffic will go through the firewall, and these policies are applicable. So let's take an example, like there is a company using Azure Virtual WAN, wants all on-premises and cloud traffic to be filtered before reaching Azure workloads. Now, instead of manually configuring route tables, Firewall Manager ensure all traffic flow through Secure Hub's Azure Firewall automatically. Because we are assigning, when we assign the rules or policies to the firewall, automatically all the traffic will start going flow through Azure Firewall. The bottom line is, even if you manage one firewall or dozen across regions, Azure Firewall Manager makes security enforcement faster, scalable, and more consistent. Now let's see it further. Now there is a question: what if we do not have multiple firewalls? What if we have a single hub, right? Let's suppose this is hub. Okay, this is hub. Okay, this is hub. Okay, and uh, these are spokes. These are spokes. So in that situation, we don't have firewall here. We don't have firewall in the spoke, right? These all are in the same region. So I'm removing region as well for the understanding. And hub has firewall. Only hub has firewall. These are only spoke. Okay, these are only spoke units and running the resources. Now we don't need this. We don't need these association because there is nothing in the spoke virtual network. There is only firewall, one firewall, which is here only in the hub. Now, in that situation, what do you think? The manager will be helpful because there is only a single firewall and we are managing all the rules from the single control plane. Let's decode this. Now, if your Azure firewall is the very first thing is, if it is deleted or maybe replaced, you lose all your firewall rules, right? Unless you disintegrate it or make it policies separate entity altogether from the firewall, right? Or you have manual backup. So you have two solutions here, right? Manual backup, then you have to go through the restoration process, things like that, export, import, a lot of things. But if you have policies setting somewhere else, then you can simply go ahead and utilize. Or what if right now you're running single firewall in one region and your business booms? So future expansion to multiple firewalls requires manual rule application then. So two things, right? You need to think from the future expansion as well, always. So firewall policies exist independently, right? Independently of the firewall instance, right? You can detach the policy from one firewall and reapply it to another. Means if we have another in future, we got another in a different region, we can apply this there, the base policy, right? So uh, future proofing for multi-region deployments. All right, now let's quickly check the pricing of Azure Firewall Manager. Let's quickly see that. If I come here, okay, this is the policy that we saw. Okay, here is the pricing. Now, Azure Firewall Manager is there by default. Let me show you. If I come here and type manager, we have Firewall Manager, and you need not to deploy it or create it. By default, it is here. It will ask you virtual hub security coverage. You can check here, virtual network firewall security coverage, DDoS. So the thing I was telling you, deployment can be done from here and security can be done from here. So let's check that. We can deploy virtual network from here. Here we go. We have two virtual network here. It is red because no firewall deployed in the virtual network because it's a lab, right? Virtual hub, we don't have any virtual hubs. Now let's go to security, Azure Firewall, but we can create virtual hub from here. And the same goes with the Azure Firewall. I don't have any firewall here, but I can create it from here. I don't have any Azure Firewall policies, but I could create it from here. And if I click on that, you see all those things you're talking about are the part of policies, right? Then we have the security partner, the Zscaler example I gave you. DDoS can also be done, and same goes with the WAF. Web application firewall policies can also be managed from here. We have one right now. So let's quickly check the pricing. So since we are not deploying this, so there is no price of the Azure Firewall Manager as such. However, if we are creating policies and applying, only then there is a charge. Now Azure Firewall policies has $100 per policy per region. It's quite expensive. And if we need policy analytics, it is again $250 per policy per month. Now, if you go with the firewall, we talked about deployment and data processing is the charge of the firewall, which is separate. If you're managing through Azure Firewall Manager, then these would be charged. This is the charge of the firewall. Right. Now, this is what we need to understand. The same thing which we draw. The global policy or parent policy and child policy. Here there is an example. We have four firewalls. Okay. One is the base policy and we have two child policy. Base policy is applicable to all the firewalls. Right. Now, what would be the pricing? The pricing was uh, Azure policy $100 per region per policy. So 400 would be the charge. Now, if we go with the child policy, this is applicable to two firewall, not one, two firewall. Then this policy will cost you again $200 per region, right? Now, firewall 0 has only single policy and child policy 2 has this firewall 3 has this policy and this policy. Now let's check child policy 1 policy is associated with two firewall, so 200 month. Policy 2, the policy has no charge. This is tricky. Child policy 2 has no charge. It associated to a single secured hub. So if a policy is associated with a single firewall, then there is a no charge. If it is more than one, there is a charge. Firewall policy is not charged if there is only a single firewall association. Okay, so there is a no charge. Now this policy, why we are paying $400 for this policy in case of this? Because policy is associated with four firewalls. This policy with two firewalls. This policy is with only one. So no charge for this. There is a charge for this. There is a charge for this. So that's how it is calculated, the pricing thing. Well, that's all about Azure Firewall Manager. I hope it was interesting and you liked it. Thank you for watching. You guys have a wonderful day.